Robert F. Kennedy and Joe Rogan, they're talking. Robert F. Kennedy is going to bring up the state of comedy and comedians throughout the past 4 years. And then Rogan's going to talk about the clear conspiring that the media did towards him and how he understands now how it all works. Very interesting conversation. I love to hear these two give their views of what's happened, because they're two people who have been like right in the middle of it. Like, we all watch it and we're like disgusted by it, but when you're in the middle of it, when you know that any search that you do of yourself is going to pop up negative, when you know that anytime you're talked about by a mainstream media company, that it's going to be negative, that they're doing a twist on you, that they're lying about you, to hear the view of people that are in it is just completely different and vital. We need to hear those people's views. We understand, we see it, we see what they're doing, but to hear those people actually talk about it and, in a sense, speak out, because the mainstream media needs calling out in that sense, is really, really vital. Let's get into the store first, though. We got the Soul Not For Sale line, we got the anti-WEF line, and we have the Great Resist line. You guys know how proud I am of the Great Resist. You've heard of the Great Reset. Don't join it. Join the Great Resist instead. We got hoodies, t-shirts, all that good stuff. Even a mug that says Soul Not For Sale on it. And if you've bought anything from this website, thank you so much. You are so appreciated. You have no idea. It helps us tremendously. Now let's get into the clip. Going to be 2 clips today. So I'm going to play one, then I'm going to have to pause. I'm going to have to track to the other one while talking, and I'm going to bring you the other one. Oh, it's going to be a task. Let's go.
You something that you were talking about before, because you said a lot of the comedians, were skeptical. But
yes.
what I saw was the opposite. I saw the comedians that should have been questioning everything, that were
falling
sort
in
of
line,
canceling people who ask questions, and including all the ones, Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert. They kind of stopped. I thought they stopped being funny, because comedians are funny when they're ridiculing authority. And they all had to stop doing that.
The only one I know out of that group is John. I know John, and John's a great guy. I have not talked to him. I talked to him in the middle of it all. I haven't talked to it since, but I thought it was hilarious when he was on Colbert and he was doing that routine.
That was really good.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
Here's a interesting thing. So that's the first clip. Now, Robert F. Kennedy, this is very interesting to see the two views, right? Because one of them is in comedy. He's in the backstage almost. The other one is watching what's going on, through the lens of you and I, the viewer, and seeing how comedians acted. So it's funny, Joe Rogan, he mentions in this podcast that a lot of comedians were skeptical, because when you look around, I'm sure you and I, it didn't seem that way. It seemed like a lot of people fell in line. A lot of people were trying to distance themselves from Rogan, from anybody that felt like Rogan, from anybody that was questioning the narrative. A lot of comedians did that. Colbert is one of them, and I wouldn't even consider him a comedian anymore, not even close, right? And then, but Joe Rogan, he's behind the scenes, and he can hear what the comedians are really thinking. They're not afraid to, like, they're backstage. They're like, this is what I think. They're saying really what's on their mind. And then when they're in the spotlight and they have the weight of their production company and their agency and their managers and all of that stuff and their fan base, and they're scared to say this and scared to say that, all of a sudden, different view. Very, very interesting. And Robert F. Kennedy's right. They became very unfunny. Colbert was doing a dance with women dressed up as syringes. It was the craziest thing. Jimmy Fallon was doing monologues, or doing a song about different variants of COVID. Like, it was ridiculous. And then who else? Oh, and then Jimmy Kimmel, of course, talking about the unjabbed, the purebloods as I call them, dying, and how they deserve it. You know, just ridiculous things. None of those things I just said are funny. All of them sound ridiculous. And when you were watching them, if you saw any of these clips, it was eerie. It was like 1984 type stuff. It was like, is this really happening? A lot of guys were unfunny. Funny enough, and I'm going to get to that next clip right now. Funny enough, there was one comedian that I was watching. This guy, Ben Bankus, he never stopped doing comedy. A lot of my comedian friends never stopped doing comedy. They were going to backyards. They were going to places they weren't allowed to go. But this one guy, Ben Bankus, he kept doing big shows in a park. He just kept doing it. And like 200 people would show up, and it was really cool. And every single time he would get a fine. And he got fines to the tune of, I want to say $10,000, something along those lines, maybe more. And actually, Russell Peters, if you've ever heard of him, he's a comedian. He paid off all of those fines for that comedian. He said, you know, just keep doing. He's like, this is the coolest stuff going on right now. Keep on doing it. And he paid off all the guys' fines for him. But you would think that all the comedians that you know and love would have that same attitude, would be doing that same type of thing, but they weren't. They all stepped back. It's funny. The ones that had something to lose really took a step back and acknowledged that they had something to lose and acted like it. The ones that are still coming up were like, I'm not stopping. I'm not stopping. Because one degree of comedian that has something to lose is now really tied to money, those golden handcuffs. And the other side, those guys that are coming up, they're still tied to the passion of it all. So it's really interesting to watch. Let's get to this next clip real quick. Switch over. Let's go. This is where Joe talks about the conspiring of the mainstream media.
Like, he's essentially just lying in front of the American people. He's just, and the same people that generally are these critical thinkers, they were so enamored by this narrative and then so captive by it, and then also captive by their initial assertions. They're a prisoner of their initial statements on it, and they didn't want to say they were wrong. It took a lot of people a long time to say, I fucked up. That's not true. It's not. I was wrong.
Has anybody actually said that?
To me, yeah. A good friend of mine, very good friend of mine who got really scared and got vaccinated and thought I was being an idiot. And then along the way started paying attention and got COVID really bad. You know, and I helped him out and sent a nurse to them and got him IV vitamins. And it's just one of those things where it's a stress test. It's a stress test for people's character. It's a stress test for anxiety levels. It's a stress test for community bonds. It's a stress test for friendships. It's a stress test. And you get to see what it was like. And I feel, honestly, even though I was in the center of it all, I felt very fortunate because I can have no questions about how it actually works, how the system actually works to go against people that are dissenters. I can have no questions because I was in the middle of it. I saw it. I saw it happen. I saw the CNN thing where they made my face yellow and said I was taking horse medication, which is that to say that and to repeat that over and over again is such a clear indication that they conspired. It's because it's uniform. It's horse dewormer, uniform. A medication that's used far more often on human beings. It's been prescribed for
billions.
Yeah, it's insane. And the fact
and won the Nobel Prize for efficacy in humans.
Yeah, in humans.
Yeah.
It was wild. It was just wild.
They had to do it.
They had to do it. It's true. They kind of did have to do it. Again, just to talk about this now. So the fact that he brought up it's a stress test. Now, I don't know about you. I've heard many people talk about how this whole thing was just a test. You know, it was what it was. You know, you can't discredit what happened. You can't discredit the people that died. You can't discredit any of that. That's all very real. But a lot of people were like, this was a test to see who would go along with what, who would cave to what, who would turn on who. Like it was that type of thing, which is really interesting. And then, you know, these people, my tinfoil friends, you know, with the hats. I got a hat just like this made out of tinfoil. Hold on, I'll put it on. And the other people were saying, they were also saying, I should say, that it's gearing up for something else. Now, I don't know that to be true, but it's possible. I mean, if you're looking around, if you've watched most of my videos, it does seem like something's gearing up. People always comment on 2030. Most of the time when I see something atrocious happening in the world, I look to the 2030 agenda, see if it matches up with anything in there. And a lot of the times it does. So I don't know if that's true, but it could be. Really much could be. And to what Joe said about them conspiring, like he said they conspired. Like, I think it's a constant conspiring because they do it time and time again. Like, he was one of them. RFK Jr., he's another one. Constantly happening to him. It's happening to him right now. It happens to Trump, happens to Tate, happens to Peterson, happens to, I'm sure eventually it'll happen to Russell Brand, but he's just so silly that it's almost like they can't do anything because he keeps it like so informational but silly at the same time. But they do it to whoever they can. It's a nonstop thing, So, yeah, the conspiring. But yeah, again, very interesting to see the views of these two men because they've both been in it. One of them is behind the scenes when it comes to show business. Another one has this very intellectual, critical thinking way of looking at things as a viewer. So interesting, very interesting to see these guys sit down and talk. So glad they did a 3 hour. Wish it was like a 3.5, 4.5 hour one, but you take what you can get. And like the video. Like the video. It helps so much. You have no idea. I always forget to say it at the beginning. Please like the video. It helps so much. It just takes 1 second. Click. Helps boost us out of the shadow realm. It takes us out of the shadow realm. But yeah, definitely check out this podcast. It's a big podcast. It's a really, really big podcast. This gentleman does not get to speak at length. He does not get to speak his mind. He's constantly in battles. It's almost like Jordan Peterson. It's like anytime you saw Jordan Peterson sit down for an interview, it was always this combative, gotcha, make this man as tense as we can. Let's catch him in something and it's so tiring to see when the person that's being interviewed has integrity, when that they have a good moral compass, when that they're trying to teach good things in the world. It's so tiring to see that over and over again. So to have RFK Jr. be able to say what he needs to say in a very calm, measured out way is just fantastic. Anyways, other than that, guys, I am out.